Our next session brings incredible leaders who are using technology to scale excellence and innovation in healthcare. And I would like to introduce, this is going to be a panel session, and I'm going to introduce the panel moderator, and after that, he'll introduce each one of our guests. So with us and leading and moderating the panel is Jason Warrelmann. Jason leads healthcare and life science practice at UiPath, which focuses on transforming the healthcare landscaping and developing capabilities, integrations, and reusable components that make UiPath a healthcare automation platform and not just a tool that works in healthcare. Jason, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Very much looking forward to this discussion. Jason, you're muted right now. Just go make sure that you are unmuted.
How about that? We better?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Really appreciate the invite. When BTOES asked for us to attend, we thought we would come and talk a little bit about automation and how it transforms the landscape. As many people know, that 50% of healthcare organizations will invest in RPA over the next 2 years. And for organizations that are scaling RPA, they're seeing 25 to 45% operational cost out, as well as a 4x return within 2 years. So we've seen substantial growth in transformation with automation across the landscape. I could talk about that for 45 minutes, but what we realized is, what does it take to scale? What does it take to go from a few use cases to many use cases to get that 4x return we talked about? It's not an easy thing. Recently, in an article and a spotlight that Class Research did, they said that once you get a good base and get a few use cases under your belt, then you take off rapidly. And a lot of the comments I get back from CFOs and CTOs is, that's all in good, but I really want to hear it from the other organizations like myself who are experiencing this. So what I brought to you today is a panel of some of our scaling clients. I'd love to introduce you to them. So one is Kurt Alexander. He's the Senior Technology Analyst at HCA Healthcare. He's leading the efforts there. Welcome, Kurt. Gary Grena, who is the Digital Process Automation at Blue Cross Blue Shield, North Carolina, who's been driving that initiative for 5 years and has brought almost $7 million of real tangible outcome to the organization with digital technology, as well as Joe Peri from Change Health. He's the Chief Automation Officer there. He is growing the enterprise automation program across business units. Change Health, of course, is a very large organization, and corralling all those different groups around automation is very difficult. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for the time today. So I'm going to drop this screen so we can put some focus on the team here. So Kurt, I would really love to start with you today and talk about why automation. Why now? Everything we're here talking about transformation. There's a story behind transformation, right? It could be, I started just because I had a big problem to solve. So it'd really be great if you can kick off this panel of explain to the team a little bit about your role and why HCA really invested in their automation program, and really what that holistic vision is and what you're trying to achieve with it today.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having us. Really appreciate the topic. I always love talking about automation, so this is a treat for me. But as far as a particular event that kicked us off, I mean, many people are aware of HCA. We're a small healthcare company. We operate about 185 hospitals across the United States and the UK, and our IT department, which is where I reside, is anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 folks on any given day. These folks are primarily executing digital workflows, which when you think digital, first thing that should come to mind is automation, right? These are often tasks that we can kick off with a bot if there's, pretty robust logic built within the process. And so last year, we transitioned CEO. Sam Hazen is our new CEO for HCA Healthcare, and one of the charges that he made to Marty Paslick, who's our CIO, is how do we start doing more with the resources that we have, right? Age-old operational question. How do we optimize existing resources? And the answer for IT, at least, has been how do we start researching different automation technologies that can take a little bit of the burden off of our staff, which, I mean, every day is the case with any other organizations listening to this. We're being asked to do more with the same amount of resources, especially with COVID right now. Everybody's working remotely, so we're having to continue servicing all of our customers with an ever-changing environment. How do we use technology to augment the processes, to augment the skills that we have? And that's what this is all about. It's really about doing more with what we have. Like I said, there's not necessarily a particular event. We've been looking at automation and specifically RPA for the last 18 months or so. And just over the past 3 months, we've really kind of, I wouldn't even say dipped our toe in the water. We're kind of diving head first because we've officially got a number of resources dedicated to this effort. I myself, for example, I was working with enterprise technology and architecture for the past several years, and I myself just joined the automation team officially yesterday. So we're really, I mean, when it rains, it pours, and so we're going headlong into this. It's going to be exciting.
No, that's terrific, Peri. I appreciate that. It's funny that you say you just joined. You've been there since the beginning, so this is and justifies the means. I appreciate that insight. So, really didn't start with any idea in mind. It's, jump on the transformation bandwagon because you see the 2 to 3 year trajectory. Joe, we've had very similar conversations at Change Health, but I think your maturity line of where you are compared to HCA is a little bit different. And good for the audience to understand really, the Change Health vision and some of the challenges you've had. Of course, for this, we said it'd be a very open, honest conversation, not just a promotion to RPA. So I know Change Health has had some challenges in the past that you're looking to receive. I mean, next we can focus a little bit on that, but really good to understand your ongoing vision and why RPA for Change Health.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I want to also echo Kurt's comment about, I really appreciate being involved and included in this, and appreciate the invite and the opportunity to talk a little bit with the group here about, what it takes to do automation. We're in chapter 3, I call it, at Change Healthcare. We've been doing this coincidentally about 3 years. We've had 2, I would say, rough starts. I came on board about 1.5 years ago to start chapter 3 and move things forward. And, I think we'll talk a little bit later about some of the, obstacles you run into or challenges that you face when you do automation a little later in our talk. But it was pretty obvious to Change Healthcare that using automation was the way to go. And we have 15,000 employees with about 15,000 contractors doing manual work. And automation is all about transforming that manual work into digital labor force. So we knew we had the opportunity there. We, of course, like many companies, have been hearing through the market that, this is the thing. This is what companies are doing to reduce costs, increase quality, and all the benefits that you get with automation. And I think the organization just kind of struggled with how to get going with it. It clearly, our executive team saw that it wasn't about whether automation tools were ready to do this work. They've been ready for quite some time now. It's more about whether the organization is ready to transform its operations. And that's really what this is. This is not a technology play. This is not an IT play. It's not a finance play. It's not about that at all. It really takes the right combination of technology and operations understanding and management in order to combine this to actually transform that work to a digital workforce. And so, we're maturing pretty quickly now. Of course, like most companies, our leadership wants to see, results and immediate returns, and how do you measure that and what do you do with it and all that good stuff. But we've built a COE, a centralized COE that has representation from different areas of the business that are impacted by this transformation, and rightfully so, because ultimately we're transforming their business operations. So at the end of the day, they still own them. But we've moved pretty far down the maturity curve with, by the way, a whole lot more to go. As you start your automation journey, we like to say the crawl, walk, run, but there are actually many more transitions in there than that. It's crawl and then start to walk but stumble a lot, and then stumble a little less, and then maybe you walk a little bit but trip down the stairs, and and eventually you look back at your your path and you go, wow, we really have moved and come a long way. But then you look at, you know, what it takes to be like a Olympic class athlete, and you've got a long way to go, you know. So that's what we're all striving for. So appreciate you having us here today.
I appreciate that, Joe, and very similar to how HCA started. Of course, you mentioned transformation a lot, and it is hard, right? Transformation is hard. You mentioned how change management is a huge piece of adoption for any product, let alone RPA, especially when it impacts the human worker so significantly for the benefit, of course, but it's combining those two together and proving that out. And Gary, in our conversation, especially from a Blues perspective, who is no stranger to automation and transformation over many years, you've had a lot of that experience with other products, other types of technology solutions, looking to optimize operations. It'd be great if you could share with the audience the Blue Cross Blue Shield North Carolina view, and how you've been driving this vision to the state.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Yeah, and once again, thank you for inviting us. I won't repeat a lot of the good things that Kurt and Joe talked about. Just to sum it up, we've been doing this since late 2017. Our goals were always to free up employees. We talked about capacity, but free up employees so that they can better serve customers, get that rote work off their plates so they can have a better work life. They can feel more empowered to serve our customers. The second one was then to actually, the whole promise of robots is to get this development out of IT and actually have our employee subject matter experts building bots. We'll talk about our ups and downs on that one in a little while. The third one is, hey, look, if you're going to do good for people, you still have to give a measurable return back to your internal investors. They're giving you hard dollars, you have to return hard dollars back to your internal investors. Those three things. We'll talk more about those later.
Appreciate that, Gary. And you talked about challenges. And I think that's really why a lot of people may have come to this session, is that there are a lot of challenges. It's not an easy thing. We heard change is not an easy thing. Technology is an easy thing. North Carolina putting the power in the hands of the business group instead of relying on IT, that's a change in itself for most organizations, right? So maybe Joe, maybe you could start talking a little bit about those challenges that you mentioned and what you've witnessed so far.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. There's definitely no shortage of challenges and potholes in the road. I'm quite certain that many of them are common among anybody heading down this journey, and there's always some unique ones too. But I started when I was just talking with the first question, about convincing people that this isn't a technology thing. And I'll even expand on that more because I think the initial mindset is, oh, we're buying a software tool or a widget that will just make life better. It's not that at all. It's if you think about automation, frankly, it's a tool that you install that does absolutely nothing until you teach it to do something, right? It's like Excel in a way. I use this analogy. It's not great, but it's all right. But Excel, you can install Excel, but it doesn't do anything until you put numbers in it, until you create spreadsheets and graphs and things like that to make it deliver value. And it's completely within your control to have it do good stuff and bad. You can have it calculate numbers incorrectly, and it'll still give you a number. Automation is very much the same way. You can make automation or train automation to do things really well, or not so good. And but I think the core of it is really getting across the line that it's not a technology thing. It's a business process transformation. That at the end of the day, the business areas still own their processes, no matter how you go about automating things. They are the owners of it. No one else is, and it stays that way. And it's really, you run into some things like, you're going to do automation, and some people embrace you, and some people, kind of stiff arm you because they see it as a threat. And again, the analogy I use there is that's like back, it wasn't that long ago, guys, that PCs came into the workplace, right? And I'm sure that the same conversations happened back then. I was like, why are we bringing this box in that does all this, stuff? I mean, my job's going to go away. We didn't realize that really spawned a lot of IT jobs, so it created a lot of jobs, and it also made all businesses more efficient. In a lot of ways, this is similar to that. It's convincing and getting people to understand that this is the way work is going to be done in the future, and it's not about if you're going to do it. It's really a matter of when you're going to do it, and getting your arms around doing it right. Some of the other quick challenges, and I'll pass the baton on, are finding qualified resources. Highly recommend, and in fact, I said this is chapter 3 of what we're doing. I highly recommend anybody heading down this path, look very closely at the personnel, especially the initial personnel you put on this type of initiative, because it's a different animal. It really does take a unique combination of understanding technology and how it can be leveraged to improve business processes through automation. You can standardize through automation. So there's a whole lot of disciplines that get poured into this bucket and stirred up that makes up this whole transformation thing. So make sure you get qualified resources in out of the gate. If you don't, which is frankly why I think our first 2 starts at Change Healthcare didn't go as they would have liked. They really thought it was something that it wasn't. And I think I'll leave, and I'll pass this on, but it's not a project. I still internally have this conversation almost on a daily basis. Whether it's you're looking at funding or ROI or delivery of benefit or whatever, it seems like everybody wants to keep putting this in this box of it's a project with a start and an end and you're finished, and I gave you $50,000 and you give me $150,000 back. It's not how it works. It's a transformation program. It's ongoing. You're constantly building stuff. You're constantly training the automation to do more and more and more. And there's a capitalizable component and an OpEx component to that. And your organization has to look at this a little bit differently because it's not a project and it's not about an IT or a technology tool. So that's just some of it. I mean, I could go on. I think, Jason, you said I'd go on for 45 minutes and talk about all the war stories around this stuff, but I'll be happy to hand this off and let somebody else throw in some other grist for the mill.
Perfect, Joe, appreciate it. And when you say about qualified personnel and who do you start with, that's a common question, right? Do I start with business? Do I start with IT? Do I start with BA? Who do I start with now? And Kurt, I know in your journey, right, heavily looking at the Six Sigma organization, right? The people that, even though it's not a project, they own the transformation and the budget for the whole corporation. Not every organization is a Six Sigma organization, right? But I think it was built that way to get around a lot of these adoption challenges. So maybe for the audience, a little bit about the challenges you have seen. I know you said you're beginning of the journey. Again, the journey's been almost 9 months old now to get us to this stage. So maybe a little bit about the challenges that you foresee coming into the next months as you start to scale.
Sure. So if Joe's on chapter 3, I kind of made the joke. I'll make the joke that we're kind of in the prologue right now. We are really just getting started. Not to say that HCA hasn't done automation. Quite frankly, we've been doing automation for 20 or 30 years, however long any of those technologies have been around. We've been using Boston Workstation for as long as I can remember, but it's been typically executed in silos. And that's what's really changing for us right now is we're trying to consolidate a number of different automation initiatives, all happening in different pockets of the organization, all providing value. But HCA as an enterprise, we're, like I said, 180 plus hospitals, 280,000 employees. And so one of the advantages that we constantly try and capitalize upon is our scale. That's what we're trying to do with some of the centralization here. We've got, and as Joe said, this is not a technology problem. This is not a technology hurdle. Some of the issues that we saw up front, things like centralization of infrastructure, as it relates specifically to RPA, we had a couple of different instances of organizations within HCA using RPA. And, we had to go and say, well, IT, if we have a play in this at all, it makes sense that, we should at least manage the infrastructure, take that burden off of the business and let them focus on actual development. Let them focus on things that add value. Let's use our IT department to, manage the hardware. Fantastic. if I could go back and deal with those problems, those are so much simpler to solve, because the biggest issue and the biggest thing that has to change is all cultural, right? There's an understanding, and I don't think this is necessarily a true understanding, but there's a perception perhaps that automation is going to remove people from the process. That is never the case. It has never been the case. And I say this a lot, especially to some of our more financially minded leaders. It's that if headcount reduction is your goal, you might want to manage your expectations a little bit, because that rarely ends up being the case. What you see more often than not is that roles are able to be repurposed. You can have specific people focusing on different tasks that add value, things that the organization thinks that those teams should be and would be focusing on had they the time to do it, had they a little bit more space without having to do a lot of the mundane, repetitive tasks. So it's a cultural shift that really needs to happen, and that's one thing that we're working on. I mean, when I think about an example, something that we would all be familiar with, it goes back to people are familiar with the agricultural or the industrial revolutions, right? Right now, we're in the middle of the information revolution, the automation revolution. People are still going to be working just like they were before and after the agricultural revolution. The difference is we just had less farmers. Same work is being done. In addition, we now have more high value added work that's being executed. It's going to be a more knowledge centric economy once this is all said and done. But again, that's the kind of conversation that we're having. It's setting people's minds at ease and letting them know that, trust me, having seen some of the technology, it is powerful, but it cannot automate an entire person's job with all the intricacies that they have to deal with and all the different exceptions that they have to handle. In some cases, we may be able to automate part of that, and that's really what we're going for, to free them up, to give them more time back in their day to do the high value, the critical thinking, the things that people should be doing. That's really the big challenge that I would say. It's culture. Culture is upstream of progress.
So what I heard, Kurt, is it's disruptive, not destructive, which is the key piece here, right?
Yes.
Of course, disruptive being from a process evolution perspective. We're all very familiar with EMR integrations. We're all familiar with claim-based processing and business workflows. These aren't disruptive. They're not destructive, but they make you more efficient. This is truly a disruptive technology as it changes the way the organization works, and everyone moves with it. Joe, you talked about Excel. Computer changed the way people worked. Excel workbooks changed the way people worked. Automation changes the way people work and makes them more efficient. But of course, there's a lot of challenges, as we were saying, and you still have to prove the value. I want to roll over to you, Gary, and talk a little bit about the challenges you're seeing in North Carolina. You've experienced this firsthand, and then roll into the next set of questions, which is really around how do we address some of these challenges by proving value. I know you've made that a main initiative at North Carolina, and I think it's some of the most mature value engineering I've seen out of a lot of the payers we work with. So maybe end the line with a little bit of that experience.
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate that. And understand the role that I play at Blue Cross. Blue Cross is a very kind, Blue Cross North Carolina, very kind, very employee-centered company. So understand when I'm talking, I'm kind of the operations finance guy. So, that's the role I play in this department. And just like you talked about, just like with Kurt and Joe, we've had our pain with this program, but we've also had quite a bit of success. We've put in over 40 use cases. There's robots going on, installed over 700 computers at Blue Cross North Carolina. We've seen our success, but boy, there's been some pain along the way. A lot of it has to do with the software package we used. We started with Pega Robotics, and what we saw with that is it really, the development velocity was just not there. It was taking way too long to build robots. Also, we could not, in the first couple of years of this program get development out of IT with that software package. So now we've had to take the pain of now switching over to UiPath. So one piece of advice is work with your architects and really make that decision on what package you use very carefully, because it can really trip you up. So now we're working with UiPath. We're switching over, and we're very excited to actually start bringing this bot development out of IT. I lead the team that's we're just following the UiPath cookbook and training advanced developers, and this whole idea of taking subject matter experts in the business and teaching them how to build robots and getting out of this whole business analyst writing requirements, writing user stories, handing it over to a developer. We're trying to get out of that very long, very expensive process. One of the other challenges that we're seeing, and then Jason, I'll move into the measurement, is you need to find high dollar use cases. Remember, as you're trying to help people, you have to find use cases that are going to pay back your internal investors. And you don't, in my opinion, get these high dollar use cases most of the time from process owners. A process owner will always be looking to you to solve their business pain. They have problems every day in their business. Hey, we're here to help them, but understand that if you're looking for your business value, your business impact from those use cases, you're not going to get them. You're going to get, it's purely Pareto. 20% of your use cases are going to give you, for us, close to 90% of our hard value. So you need to find the large use cases to then pay for your program, so then you can help people and help customers. So you need to find an executive sponsor. Both Kurt and Joe talked about culture change. Well, every so often you can't, you don't have the years to change the culture. You need to go to an executive sponsor who has the view of the enterprise mindset, where a process owner is kind of looking at their little area. And you need that executive sponsor to help you drive large enterprise impact. The last one on this is never think there's any relationship between the size of the robot and the return on investment. You can spend months, 3 months, building a very complicated robot, get a very tiny tiny return, or you can place a very simple robot in a very strategic place and get a very large return. So, everybody knows about a quad chart. Find those easy robots that have very high impact and really watch your backlog. Because you can be doing a whole bunch of use cases that you really are helping people, and 6 months turns around and you got a grand total of $150,000, and that's not going to pay for your program. So, Jason, do you want me to go to the measurement systems?
Yeah, I think so. I think the next big question I wanted to ask the team is really about value, and it's something that I think it's a lot of times you're talking about those high value use cases, right? How do you measure them? Running transformation programs myself for almost 2 decades, my biggest issue was, how do I show value to a process we've re-engineered? Because there might not be a way to extract value. It could be qualitative, could be quantitative, especially when it doesn't have to do with real headcount reduction. So a little bit about how you're addressing that, and then we'll go through the team.
Do you mind if I add on to something Gary said? It's something that, you hit the nail on the head, Gary, with cost. Something to really walk away with that I repeat over and over again at Change Healthcare: complexity drives cost, volume drives savings. That simple. Everybody looks at just automate. It's like, okay, well, to your point, it's like if it's an extremely complex thing that you do one time a year, your cost is going to be really high and your return is very low. If it's a really simple thing you do 10,000 times a day, boom, right? That's low cost to implement, very high ROI. And it seems really simple, but it's real easy to get lost in the weeds when you start doing automation, because it's that mindset of and some executives feel this way, and other leaders in the organization, that go find the big thing, go find the big fish and land it, right? And my view on it is that that's not how it typically works. What you're really doing is you're building a program that can deliver a lot of velocity. And so, I call it death by 1,000 paper cuts. Yeah, we'll get it done, but we're not going to get it done by landing a whale. We're going to get it done by landing, 100 million sardines. That's what we're going to do. And we need to do it. We need to do it fast. Of course, if we find some huge volume process that's really simple, we're going to tackle that one, because that's a big one, right? So you go after those. But if that's your mindset and that's all you see, you're going to, honestly, you're going to fail at doing this, because there aren't that many of those out there.
That's a really good takeaway. As we look at any kind of process, like Jason was talking about, I do have a Lean Six Sigma engineering, process engineering background, like a lot of people. And every process has at least 3 measures: cost, velocity, and quality. And what you're always going to be tempted to do with automation is try to reduce your cost, the cost of the process. And usually that's people cost, right? It's hours. But what you really have to do to get large impact is look at the velocity of your process and the quality of your process. So what we do at Blue Cross of North Carolina is we do look at hours saved. We track our hours saved and we report those up, and we have goals. But we looked at the hours saved as more of, we don't try to turn that into dollars, some kind of weird conversion of dollars. No, we just say this is our measure of how we help our internal employees. We're taking rote work off their shoulders, and we know they're going to do a good job for customers, and they're going to have a better work life. Where we also have a measurement that I won't talk about, employee experience. But the one I really want to focus on is where we've made a lot of strides, is what I call realized value creation. And this, I wrote down one of the first, I'm an engineer, so you have to write an operational definition of these things, so everybody realizes what this is. So our definition of a realized value creation is an auditable, annualized financial impact on operating income from DPA financed automation. So there's a big word in there, operating income. So what I would highly stress is get to know your income statement of your organization. This is maybe for a lot of people who are more IT focused, they don't really think about this, but if you can build a bot, you can sure learn an income statement and a cash flow statement. So right at the top, you have revenue. And what we found at Blue Cross is that we're able to, by increasing our velocity, we're able to increase our margin from revenue growth. So we're able to speed up our underwriting to quote cycle for alternative quotes. And that had a very large impact on our top line revenue growth. Did we try to cut out underwriters or cut the number of people in the process? No, we didn't. We wanted that velocity increase. We didn't care about the number of people in that process. Once again, what I always call the cost part of this process is small ball. You will work like the dickens to get 2 people out of a process, and those people cost the company $50,000 a piece. So you will kill yourself and fight with the manager to get people out of a budget, and when it's all over, you got $100,000. What I'm suggesting here and what we've done is go after financial waste instead. So we increase revenue growth. The other one we do for velocity is in our cash cycle. So look at your cash flow statement. One thing we did, in anybody that knows cash flow knows that you want to speed up your receivables and you want to slow down your payables. And that increases your current account balance. That's real money in the bank. So that's a chunk of money that's in your current account. And it's also driving now marginal investment income, or at the very least, interest on your current account, your checking account. So how are some of the ways you can do this? Well, one thing we did, we sped up our check writing process to the hospitals. And what the reason we were able to do, we did that, and what that did is it actually allowed us to hold on to not pay our claims for an extra 2 days. So we were able to hold on to our claims, paying the claims for 2 extra days, which dramatically increased our current account balance in millions of dollars. So we did that by, we were paying our claims out pretty fast so that we would make it within 30 days, but we sped it up so we could hold on to that money faster. I didn't say that very well, but really look at your cash flow. And finally, you know, we're looking at payment integrity. Are we paying our claims correctly? The other one is risk revenue. Anybody who does anything with Obamacare and Medicare, you know, the federal government gives you risk revenue. Well, how can you make sure that you are very accurately reflecting your risk in your risk pool to the federal government so you can increase your risk revenue? There's millions of dollars sitting there. So, you know, just to conclude this, you know, you have to be able in this business to talk to your finance folks in their language. And you have to create a strong, very good reputation to continue to get this investment. Now, we've all been through these investments where, hey, you can get money for the first couple of years by just being the new kid on the block and the new exciting thing. But you know what? If you're going to have a year-over-year investment, you have to be able to show return and have this reputation of that the return you are showing is actually a hard dollar cost savings. That was a long talk. I apologize for the length, but.
No, I think it needs to be said, Gary, right? You're right. A lot of organizations do focus on the cost out, the headcount reduction. It's how RPA typically is sold initially. And your message is that, you know, you'll kill yourself trying to get there. You need to really understand the big numbers and how automation impacts that, because that's how operations looks at it with the people, right? Yeah. People aren't just a number. They impact the bottom line somewhere. So we always talk about impacting the bottom line. You want transformation to be successful, you need to impact the bottom line numbers, not the small costs.
And where you find, you know, it's easy to have a manager tell you where their pain is because they can speak to you, but the enterprise as a whole can't speak to you. So you need to go find where you can figure out the enterprise. And the way you learn where enterprise pain is through the cash flow statement and the income statement. That's how they're talking to you. And you know, I always say black belts and bank robbers go to where the money is. Yep. And just like what Joe talked about, high volume, go to your income statement, get to be best friends with some of your finance people because they know where the financial waste is. And then start looking where they're pointing you to in your income statement. That's where you put automation. Yep. That's where you pay off your internal investors.
Fantastic feedback, Gary, and I think definitely needed to be said in the conversation. Just for aspects of time, we'll accelerate this a little bit. And I just want to coin on something that, you know, Kurt and Joe, I heard from both of you, and Joe, you throw it in there, which is you have to look at a lot of things that are standardized and we do a lot of, because sometimes the more complex ones will increase the cost in the long term, right? And I'm always looking at, you know, year one, there's always an investment to any project, but you want to maximize your return in year 2, year 3, and year 4. This isn't a one and done. Transformation with automation never ends, because you would never say, I'm going to hire an employee and they're always going to do the same job every year, right? No, employees need to be trained. They need to learn new skills. They need to be enhanced, right? We all do that in our career. Automation is no different, but then getting it across everyone so they can enhance their own skills while the robots are enhanced is really the difficult part, going back to your chain. So I wanted to bring the conversation back to a little more transformative, which is automation robotics for everyone. right, for every person. We call it AREP. And I know with all three of your organizations, it's something that we're heavily looking at. I mean, Kurt, it's something you're looking at heavily at HCA. Joe, you're just starting on the enterprise, which is, you know, where a lot of the automations like Gary's talking about really automate the back end, right? Automate server side. But what if I give a robot or a digital assistant to a person, right? To all my employees, to all 60,000 HCA employees. And there's a string of automations that they now manage on a daily basis. It might not be the high complex ones, but if they're all doing low complex automations, that all adds up and impacts those hours spent. If I can take 3 hours off of a clinician's time in the evening so they can spend it with the family, I think everyone would appreciate that, right? If I can reduce the administrative's work up front, you know, scanning and document, make it real time, I think everyone would appreciate that. So maybe a little bit, you know, Kurt, maybe start with you on what your thoughts are there and how you see that potentially playing out for the long term at HCA.
Yeah, you saw me nodding emphatically because you said the magic word, clinicians, right? So our lifeblood at HCA and really healthcare more broadly is nurses, it's clinicians. We've got about 90,000 clinicians, and so when you think about opportunities, the benefit gained from automating even a minute of their day, that's multiplied by nearly 100,000. Not only do we realize the financial benefits from that, but guess what? That clinician now gets to spend more time in front of the patient, which, let's just be perfectly honest here, clinicians didn't go to they didn't go to nursing school, they didn't go study for years and years so they could spend time in front of a computer documenting. They spent all of their effort and their money learning to become a clinician because they wanted to help patients. And frankly, that's what patients want as well. That's why you go to a hospital, that's why you go to a healthcare facility, is to receive care, whether it be from clinicians or physicians. So I have no doubt in my mind that in the future, something like that is necessary, that we have clinicians who have a digital assistant at their fingertips with a robust library of different automations that are EMR agnostic, that are kind of solution agnostic, but that know how to operate the ins and outs of their workflow and can take the intent after the clinician interacts with a patient, and then they go back to the digital side of their workflow, and they have to enter information, they have to transfer things around, they have to input, you know, ABC into this system. How do we automate that piece? Because again, if we talk about automation vision, I would love to, let's just go big. I'd love to double the time that clinicians spend in front of patients, right? And one of the biggest barriers to that is all of the digital, all of the documentation work that are required, that are regulated, that are there for a reason, but that don't necessarily need to be performed by that clinician if we can automate it with a robot. Long term, I think that's absolutely where we need to be, but just to make a long story marginally less long, I would say that initially we look at a lot of the unattended use cases that we can tackle end to end, right? Processes where we can entirely remove the person from the equation and let them focus on other things. Once we get our sea legs down at that point, then we can start introducing automation to processes where we can't address the full A to Z, right? We can tackle little chunks. And so we introduce the digital assistant at that point. And again, that's a longer term goal, but certainly somewhere that we're going to get.
I know we're on a few minutes here. Maybe Joe, you can cycle up before we start to take questions on, you know, on that same ARIP concept. I know being, you know, a heavy service provider, right? You see the other side, which are all these transactional automations, right, that fit perfectly into this desktop automation scheme. Maybe a viewpoint a little bit from your side and where you see automation for everyone fitting.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, we are a little bit different. We're in the same industry, but you know, we're mostly mid and back office type services, and so you know, we look at a couple of primary things to what Gary was talking about, which by the way could be a whole nother session about how you measure stuff, because we found within finance there's even different definitions of how you count the money. But we focus on cost per transaction, right? How do we deliver value through greater accuracy, greater speed, lower cost per transaction? And then, of course, within our own walls, how does that transform itself into something like revenue uplift or, better cash flow? And so in order to do that, there's really two basic approaches with your automation tools. One is centralized automation or unattended automation, which is really, hey, you do this process all the time. I can just build a bot, put it on a server, and it pulls it whenever it's available, and it does the work, and you really don't need an interaction with the person. The second time is this concept of assisted automation, which is really like a digital assistant. It's like having your own, digital employee sitting next to you that you can hand work over to and say, can you take care of these, 1,000 transactions, 500 transactions for me? All of that is good stuff. I mean, it allows people to be, faster, better, cheaper, and get more things done. And I think there's a piece to this that I think is also really important to understand. And a lot of organizations, and I can't speak for the other gentlemen on this call, but a lot of organizations start with a centralized model, right? That we know the automation tools and they know the business, and so we work together and we automate things. The reality is most of the knowledge is in the business users, not in the how do you train automation to do something. I can teach a business user to be pretty darn dangerous with automation in about half a day. They get really good in a couple few weeks, maybe a few months. They get, really, really good at it. It's actually better to train people to use automation, to build it themselves, to use a concept called citizen builders or citizen developers, because that's how you really get scale. As long as you centralize your build model, you're restricted, you're resource constrained by that model. Once you open it up to all your employees, that's when you can really scale and grow. And again, use the bad analogy of Excel. If only a centralized team could put the numbers in Excel and hand it back to you, you can only get so much work done in Excel. But if you teach people how to use Excel and you put 100 copies, 500 copies out there, all of a sudden the scale and the leverage you can get using a tool like Excel grows exponentially. And so our vision at Change Healthcare is to decentralize the model by and large and use a citizen builder, citizen developer method going forward.
Very good. Gentlemen, what a fascinating review of robotics process automation and real life practitioners who are implementing significant positive change that creates value. So thank you so much. We have run out of time on this session because it is such an interesting topic. There were several questions that were posed, and I want to thank Lisa Weber from UiPath directly answering several of those questions. There may be additional questions, and we're asking people to go into the page that we have created for this event, and you can look under my name, post your questions in there, and we'll have Jason and others come in and provide answers to some of those questions. But I want to take the time and thanks Jason, Kurt, Gary, and Joe for sharing your wisdom and expertise, not theoretically, but practically on how you make these things work. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with the global audience today.
Yeah, appreciate Jose and
Thank you
Kurt.
so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our this segment of BTOES Healthcare Live. We will be wrapping up the first day with a terrific presentation from Tina Wilson. Tina Wilson is the Executive Change Management Leader for the Joint Commission Center for Transforming Healthcare. And Tina is going to talk to us about leaders transforming healthcare and activating operational excellence through trust and change management. As you have seen today, we are bringing varied perspectives into healthcare transformation and operational excellence. Some perspectives are cultural, some perspectives are on business and digital transformation, and some of these perspectives are very tactical. So we hope you enjoyed that. At the top of the hour, we'll see you again with Tina Wilson and talking to us about transforming healthcare by activating operational excellence. So see you back at the top of the hour. Thank you very much.